Hello, everyone. So here we are. That's great. Okay, 10 seconds left. That's great. Yeah, so many people. That's super cool. Hello, Michael. Hey, Morgan. Remy. I know all of you guys. Hey, Senor. Hey, it's great. Hey, Andre, Alessandro, Pascal, Dimitri, Cheng, Luca, Lucas. There is two Lucas today. Yeah, that's great. So yes, okay. So I'm gonna just wait for like a few minutes, just waiting for the people joining the webinar. Yeah, normally we are doing that at yeah, one hour later, but I'm not in France right now, so I wanted to do it earlier. Where is the helicopter? Hey Guillaume, nice guys. So yeah, I'm just gonna like share my screen at the moment. So okay. Where is my screen? Yeah, okay. So we are waiting for 2 minutes more, and then we can start. If people come like later, they can all always see like the record, so there is no problem for that. Yeah, I've just used Sumit Devat. So okay, if you look at the tabs that you get, so you have the chat. So obviously, some of you are using already the chat, so that's great. So you can like ask your question here, but you also have like a questions tab where you can ask your question. It's great for me because it's ordered the right way. Then I can pick like the questions and respond to all of them, obviously. And you have also like the poll system. So I've just sent one questions to you guys is who is using AWS. So if you want to respond, that's great. Then I can know exactly if you are like already experienced with AWS or not. So yeah, that's great. Hey, Raphael, welcome. Melvin, welcome. Thibaut, welcome. Yeah, a lot of you. Thiago, that's great. Welcome, guys. Okay, 30 seconds and then we can start, I guess. That's great. Okay, most of you are using AWS, so you are familiar. Some of you are not. So yeah, you will see it's quite like simple to understand. Okay, so it's time to go. So thanks everyone for being here. It's great to have you. It changed a lot for me because normally what I'm doing is mostly like community call with our community, and that's great. Now I can. So it's been a long time that I made like the first webinar where we talk deeply in details of how things are working at Qovery. So the goal of this talk is to show you, so explain a bit more what's Qovery and how does it work behind the scenes. So that's great. But first of all, I want to introduce myself. So I'm Romaric, CEO and co-founder of Qovery. I'm a developer myself. I've more than 10 years of experience in development and in infrastructure management. And yeah, I'm super passionate about like coding. I used to code in a different several language like Python, Kotlin. Now I'm practicing Rust, which is like a very cool language. And we are using actually a Rust at Qovery. I'm going to show you where we are using that. So yeah, so the agenda for today is, so we are going to talk about what's Qovery, obviously, how Qovery works behind the scene. That's super important just to see. You will see that we have made a great interface, something that is super simple to use for any developers, but behind the scene, there's like tons of complexity that I'm going to show. And we are going to talk about more details about like Qovery engine. So the Qovery engine is the deployment engine that we're using, that we have built to deploy the application, and it's an open source project. Then we'll finalize the talk with the Q&A session. So feel free to ask your questions with the tab system that you have. If you have like any questions during the talk, just feel free to ask, then I will respond as soon as possible. So okay, that's great. So first, what's Qovery? So that's a very good and very good question. So some of you are already like familiar with the platform, you're using it, but basically, so Qovery it's a platform, deployment platform that we are building to simplify the way that developers deploy applications on AWS and other cloud providers. So basically, you're a developer, you want to be like, you're building your applications, and at some point you want to run your application for real in life, to make it accessible to your users. So you need to deploy those applications, to host them somewhere, and then you will a lot of developers today use AWS to host your application. But the problem here is that managing using AWS requires some knowledge, infrastructure knowledge, and stuff like that. Even if it's quite simple, if you compare to what you get 10 years ago, like managing infrastructure, so servers and so on and so forth, it's still like quite complex for most of the developers and the next generation of developers. So what we provide is a simple solution. It's a Heroku-like experience on top of your AWS account. And then from that, you can deploy applications. So you pick your repository, you pick the different services that you want, like a PostgreSQL database. And then from that, Qovery will take care of managing deploying the application and managing the application on your AWS account. So Qovery manage much more. So we go beyond like application deployment. It's not only building and deploying the application, but we also run and scale your application. We rely a lot on the managed services that are provided by the cloud provider. AWS is a great platform, but we extend those possibilities and we make it like super simple to anyone to manage that. Today, we have like more than 12,000 developers using our platform from more than 100 countries. They're using, so we have developers that are quite experienced using Qovery with more than 5 years of experience. We have developers that are completely new. They were like coding for just a few weeks or few months, and they are all using the platform. It's super smooth and easy to use. So just to summarize that, it's so Qovery is like Heroku-like experience, super easy to use. But we also provide like a production-ready infrastructure in just 30 minutes on top of your cloud providers. So that's great. We add capabilities like pull request environments. So when you create a pull request, then you get like an environment. You have the production, the staging, but also like feature environments dynamically. We reduce the cloud cost also because the stack that we're building is state-of-the-art platform, so we can reduce the cost drastically. And we have made our solutions to be like extensible because we are working mostly with growing companies. And at some point, if you stick to the Heroku-like experience, then you miss opportunities to grow with the team. So that's what we provide today. So that's it. Maybe if you want at the end, if you are like quite curious about that, I can make like a quick demo about the product. But I want to dig into the details of Qovery right now because it's a bit long. So yeah, this is so let's get started. So Qovery. So if you look at Qovery, so I told you that we are managing. So we are deploying application on the cloud account of our customers. What does that mean? It means that we have to install Qovery on their cloud account. Qovery, so if you look at the Qovery, the solutions, the complete solution, you can split it in three different parts. You have the outside parts, the Qovery infrastructure parts, and the user AWS account parts. So that's the part that is on the customer side. So what happens here is that we are providing what we call, so we have four main parts, so main components in Qovery. We have the Qovery control plane. We have the web console that is connected through an API to the control plane. We have the Qovery engine and the Qovery agent. So those solutions, so we have two solutions that are running on our own infrastructure, and we have two solutions that are running on the infrastructure of our customers. And what's important is here, the customer will manage their infrastructure. So those users will manage their infrastructure by using our web console or API, so through our Qovery infrastructure. And we have like the Qovery engine and the Qovery agent that are connected to the control plane. And from that, we manage their infrastructure. So if we look into the details of the responsibilities, we have, so the control plane that is written in Kotlin is in charge of the authorizations, the business logic, the scheduling, the billing, all the different pieces that makes the platform super easy to use. Obviously, we have the web interface that is written in Angular that makes it like super smooth to anyone to get started. But we also have like a CLI, and we have like customers that are using directly the API. So it's completely possible. So it's all interfaces. We have the Qovery engine that is written in Rust that is in charge of abstracting the cloud of our customer, because I told you that we're managing AWS, but also other cloud providers, but is in charge of making sure that the applications that are deployed, the system is still consistent, the infrastructure is always up and running, and the applications that are deployed are well running. So this is what is in charge of. And we have the Qovery agent that is in charge of forwarding the logs from the applications to the control plane at the daemon. What does that mean? It means that we are not storing anything on our side when we are deploying applications on the cloud of our customer. We are storing the logs, we are storing the database, and all those stuff are staying in place on the cloud provider of our customers. But if we need to, for instance, show the logs, the application logs from our customers for an application, specific applications to the users, because they want to get access to that through the web interface, then the Qovery agent is in charge of forwarding those logs. But they are not stored at any time on the control plane. It's only streaming information. Okay, that's good. So do you have like questions here, or is it like super clear for you? Okay, just let me know. Feel free to ask your question. We have time. Okay, so this is like the big picture, I would say, of Qovery, the different parts. But now we are going to dig into the details of that, and mostly on the two parts, so the Qovery infrastructures, but at a higher level, and then at the deeper level on the customer's infrastructure. So if we pick the chart that we get just before, so we receive. Let's imagine that we are deploying an application. So what happens behind the scene? We receive. So it could be like the user that is triggering a deployment, or it could be like a message that you received by GitHub or GitLab. Because with Qovery, when you make like a change in your code and you push your changes on your GitHub or GitLab account, then Qovery hook your repository and will receive all the information from the change that you make. And when you make like a change, what happens is Qovery receive from on the control plane, receive the information. And what we'll do is that first we'll check if an application does exist for that webhook. That's the first things to do. It's to filter that. It's what we call matching the applications. Once we have matched the applications, so it means like finding the applications by their GitHub, their Git repo URL and their branch, then we'll make what we call matching deployment rule. What does that mean? It means that with Qovery, you have like different rules that you can apply when you want to deploy your application. Maybe you want to deploy automatically like a new version, or maybe you don't want. There are like plenty of rules that we are managing, dozens of rules. And from that, then we choose what we call the Qovery engine. So the Qovery engine, for one customer, you can have like at least one Qovery engine, but you can also have like multiple Qovery engines, because with Qovery, you can manage applications deployment on different infrastructure, different clusters, different AWS accounts, but also different cloud provider. So that's what makes the control plane. So choosing the right resources, the right infrastructures, depending on the repository and the rules that are set by the users. Okay. And when all of that is done, so if the deployment is ordered, then we send like a deployment request to the Qovery engine. In fact, it's not really exactly that. It's because we don't have like access to the cloud account of our customers. In fact, what happens is that we have the Qovery engine that is running on the infrastructure of our customer that is going to pull the information, pull the deployment request from the control plane directly. Obviously for security purpose, for compliance. Yeah, I'm just looking at the questions because I'm myself, maybe there's like someone that is, hey, Angelos. Okay, good. Feel free to ask your question for that. So once we have like pull a deployment request, then we'll proceed in deploying these things. So just a deeper details on that, because you can see that there's like different colors and different boxes. So when we deploy on AWS, so we are before like deploying in applications, what happens is that the user will install Qovery on his cloud account. What does that mean? It means that Qovery will start to bootstrap the infrastructure, to start to prepare the infrastructure. So configuring the different VPCs, managing, so behind the scene for the stateless part, we are using Kubernetes and the manage one, so EKS. So it's going to spawn like an EKS server with the different nodes and instances. All of that can be like tiny configured by the user, but we have also like a default configurations. And from that, we'll like manage load balancer and so on and so forth. And when the infrastructure is ready, then it can start to deploy their applications. And deploy the application, what does that mean? When you have like a stateless application, it's going to be run on Kubernetes, but we also manage services, manage applications, manage services mostly. And for instance, if you're running in production with Qovery, you're better to use something like let's say that you're running like a database, a production database. You're better to use RDS, manage database, because you are sure to have like the backups, the point in time recovery stuff, and so on and so forth. And what we provide with Qovery is so from the web interface, you can say, hey, I want to run like one application, maybe two instances of my application, but I also want to run like a database with my applications, and I want to use like a managed database because I'm running in production. And that's what you can get from that. You can so the Qovery engine is in charge of bootstrapping all of that. So scheduling, so deploying the application, so the container image, because we're managing container on Kubernetes, and also preparing the RDS instance, for instance, because he wants to use like PostgreSQL manage one RDS and linked the RDS to the applications. Does it make sense? Yeah. Okay. If you have like any questions, just feel free to ask. I know it's maybe not super. It could be quite detailed here. One other thing is concerning like the network. So we're managing the VPC, but also let's say that the user wants to deploy his application, but also get access to his application from outside. So from HTTPS, he wants to expose his application. So what will happen behind the scenes? Qovery will take care. So the Qovery engine will take care of bootstrapping. So a first load balancer. It will spawn also and set up like an ingress rules, manage the service and link the ingress to the service, and then link the ingress to the load balancer. All of that is automatically managed. Yeah. One other aspect is I told you, so the engine is open source, so you can get access to the full code, all the details, and even like the configuration script. They are like all available on GitHub on our repository. I've shared the link just at the bottom, but I'll share it at the end of the talk. Yes. Okay, here we are. What happens in the details of the Qovery engine? Because we are talking a lot about this engine. So the Qovery engine first is like a Rust application. Okay, so when I was talking about the Qovery engine, there's two things to consider. So you have the Qovery engine process. The Qovery engine process, in fact, it's just a container. So where you have like the Qovery engine runtime and the binaries. So different resources that are running into the same container. This container is running on the infrastructure of our customers. Okay, they are completely isolated into a namespace, specific namespace. Hey there. Oh, there is one question maybe. Yeah. So Paul, okay, is asking, are things like the RDS instances managed by the engine or by a KS, so Kubernetes controller operator? No, Paul, the RDS instances are managed by the Qovery engine and by Terraform as well. I'm going to talk about that here because you can see into the screen. So this slide, you can see that the Qovery engine is also like using binaries, external binaries like Terraform. And this is exactly where we are like using so directly the AWS API for some stuff, but we are also using like third-party tool like Terraform to manage like cloud resources, cloud provider resources. Okay. You can tell me if it's clear or not. That's no problem. Okay. So yeah, I was talking about, so the Qovery engine process is composed of the Qovery engine runtime and the binaries, the external binaries that are used by the Qovery engine itself. And what happens is inside the Qovery engine, so it's is in charge of like one super simple deployment flow. In fact, we have different flows that you can compose. It depends on what you want to do. For instance, when you are bootstrapping the infrastructure, so it's the Qovery engine itself that is in charge of bootstrapping and updating the infrastructure of our customer. And it's just a deployment flow that is, it's a state machine where each state is like a process and is launching like different steps. So what you get from the Qovery engine is that you will have like three main phases that are, so three main steps that are like executed. All those steps are like transactional. What does that mean? It means that if we have like any problem at any time, then we are able to roll back into like a different stage. It's something that I'm showing just after. Even if it's a bit, it's not really true because it depends. For the stateless application, for the stateless resources, it's super easy to roll back to like a previous version, working version. But for the stateful one, we are not doing that because obviously when you're running, like for instance, a database, rolling back like a database is not as simple as just rolling back like a stateless application. But what you have to understand here is that if for the stateless part, something wrong happen, like for instance, when you start to deploy the application, the container, and it doesn't run, then Qovery will take care of rolling back automatically, so the application to like a previous working state. That's super important. So the build container phase is the phase where, so Qovery is mostly like a CD platform and not really a CI, but we include also like the CI feature, but mostly only the build part. So the build part is when we receive some information from the control plane to deploy an application. Then we look at the Git repository. We'll get access via a private key to the repository. So we'll clone that repository on the infrastructure of the customer. It's not like clone on our infrastructure. It's only on the infrastructure of the customer. Then we manage like to build the application. So we have two build modes. In fact, we have like Docker. So we're using directly Docker. So the user and the customer has to provide like the Docker file for the image, for the container to build. Or it can use like Bitpack. Bitpack is a technology that we're using. It's an open source technology provided by Heroku that is able to build like final container image only, and without having to provide like a Docker file. So that's very convenient to have like production image. It doesn't work with all the language, but it works with all the most Prometheus languages. So once the build phase is done, then we go to the push container phase. The push container phase is going to use like the AWS API or external like third-party tools for that. And we are going to store the image into the registry. So the container registry ECR, so for AWS, we are going to store the final container image into the registry of its cloud provider. So it's super transparent and convenient, and all those data once again are stored on the cloud account of our customer. And once it's done, then we order. So we order to Kubernetes. So we made all the setup. So it's the deploy container phase. We deploy the image into Kubernetes. So into like a different namespaces. It was like the slide just before, because here you can see that the resources, so the Qovery resources are like isolated into one namespace, specific namespace, and you have like the other resources, so the customer resources, and they are like isolated by environment. I'm not gonna dig into that detail, but it's an important one. But each environment, so you can deploy multiple environments with Qovery, and each environment get their own like namespaces. And what is going to do, it's done by the Qovery engine on the deploy phase. So here we are going to deploy the applications. We are going to bind, so manage the ingress, manage the load balancer if we need, and so on and so forth. So to do that, we are using like two main tools. It depends on what we need to manage, but it's N. If you know about that, it's the apt get from like for managing like Kubernetes, and we are using Terraform as well. Yeah. Any question here? Okay, not really, not yet, I would say. Okay, that's great. I hope it's super clear. Just feel free to ask. There is no like stupid questions. Okay, it's super important. Okay, so if we look at the transaction phase, so the transaction engine is super important in Qovery, because we guarantee to our customer that when they use a platform, then they will never like get into a state where they can't like get back to something that is working. It's managed and handled by the transaction engine that we have incorporated into the engine, the Qovery engine. And it's super simple to, so I wanted to show you like how does it work, because the code is available on GitHub, so you get access. You have the link here, but it's super simple. You know, it's like a state machine, as I told you. So with the Qovery engine, you can compose like the different steps that you want to perform during like a deployment. So you can say that you want to make like a build, then you want to push the image into the registry, and then you want to deploy the applications. Okay. And what happens is, if something wrong happened at some point, you have like different functions. So you have like the usual functions that they are going to execute something that you want, but you also have like to implement the error equivalent. So if something bad happened during, for instance, the deploy environment phase, then you will automatically, so the Qovery engine will automatically call the deploy environment error function. It's something, and you have to implement that. In fact, it's not you have to implement that, we have to implement that. When we include like a new cloud provider, for instance, because we're managing AWS, Scaleway, DigitalOcean, and we plan to manage also Microsoft Azure and also a Google Cloud Platform, then we have to implement a thread, what we call a thread. So it's an interface. If you're familiar with Java, it depends on the language that you're using. And you have to implement those functions, and then you have to handle the case where something bad happened at some point. And you have like tons of functions like this, because obviously we are running in the cloud, and in the cloud, nothing nothing good happen all the time. Something you have like a bad surprise, and you have to manage those cases there. It's super important. And that's it. When you have like finally you have like deployed, so it's all executed and all the things goes well, and then you end up to have like your application that is running. So for the user, it's super simple, so because he gets like this view from the web interface, so he gets access to his application, seeing that all those green lights that are the application is running, but behind the scenes you have like all those different details that are running. And it's super frustrating, because when you are like making a product that is super simple to use, you have to hide all the complexity. And this is where it's super frustrating, because, and that's why I wanted to make this talk with you guys. So just a few important notes. here, the things that you have to keep in mind is that here I've shown we are like just deploying one application, but let's imagine that you're doing that at a large scale. Like we are doing at Qovery more than thousands of deployments per day. It means that you have to scale the system. The system must like be able to manage all those deployments because it's super frustrating. And I guess like some users from the community that were at the beginning, if we look back like 1 year ago, it was like super long sometimes to like deploy because you had to wait for all the other deployments that are made. But now it's managed in parallel, and we have like a different systems like queue and priority queue to manage that. And it's like super complex when you start to manage like thousands of deployments per day. So that's what we're doing actually. Concerning like the infrastructure, it's same. We have like the program, but we are also managing like infrastructure. So it's remote infrastructure that we're managing. We have customers in US, in Europe, in Asia, in Australia, in Africa. So in all the different, so we have more than 100 country user coming from those countries that are using the platform. And it could be like super complex as well, because it means that you have to be able to manage the latency and all those things. So yeah, this is where you see that you're managing like a big system. And the stability is obviously like our main priority today. So at the beginning of COVID, it was like quite flaky. Sometimes we get like bugs, and reliability was like a certain issue. But since we have like developed the second version and we have launched that in September, we have also like made thousands of tests that are running and testing the platform all day long to make sure that the platform is reliable, super reliable. And this is, you can find as well the test on the Qovery engine part, because that's the only part that is open source, and you will find all the different tests that we are running across the different cloud providers that we manage. And don't forget, that's the most important thing. Developer experience is really the key. You can like, we are talking about the details and all those things, but at the end of the day, you have like users that are using the platform. They don't really care about how how complex is the platform. They are, if you look at AWS, for instance, it's probably super complex. I used to be like SRE managing infrastructure worldwide when I was in the high frequency trading industry. And I know how it can be like super painful. So big up to the AWS team and other like cloud providers, because they are making like amazing job. But at the same time, they can't be like on both sides working on the infrastructure and the experience. And that's what we want to fix with Qovery. We want to bring the simplicity, make the power of AWS super accessible to anyone. That's exactly what. So just to conclude, we are already at the end of the talk. I hope you liked it. But yeah, just to conclude, so Qovery is here to simplify the AWS experience and other cloud provider. We have like three main components that are composing Qovery. So we have the control plane, the Qovery engine, the Qovery agent. So all of that, they have like a single responsibility. If you look back to the slides where I show all of that. We have built like a transactional engine to the Qovery engine that is in charge of deploying the application, just in case that something goes wrong at any time, then we can roll back into like previous working version. And the Qovery engine is obviously open source. So you can take a look at that. So thank you, everyone. That's already the end of the talk. I didn't want it to take too much time to you. Do you have like any questions? Thank you, Paul. It's glad to hear that you like the presentation. Just one word as well. We are hiring, obviously, because like we are engineering. So I'm an engineer myself. I'm the CEO. We are growing super fast. We are like 15 in the team, mostly engineers. We are still hiring like back engineers and front-end engineers. So if you're interested, you can just drop me a message or just join to jobs, apply to jobs.qovery.com. That's great. Yeah. So I'm looking at the questions. Oh, thank you, Laurent. Thank you, Senor. That's good. Thank you, Tayo. No other questions? So if you have like other questions, just feel free to send it by email or on Discord. We are super accessible. Oh, I have one other. Pascal, thank you for the talk. I was wondering how the security was managed with Qovery engine, since it's quite a critical entry point to cloud provider. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, it's exactly, it's a very good question. In fact, we consider when we started to build the platform that we were already compromised on Qovery. It's something that I've seen before. We've all been there, like managing issue, and the problems can come from outside, but also inside. And the way, if I go back to the slide, the way that we're managing that is first, the code is completely open source for the Qovery engine. It's super important because it means that we are not hiding something. There is no backdoor, nothing. So you can inspect the code from you because it's running on your side. And the second thing is that it's not our control plane that is making the connection to the Qovery engine, but it's the Qovery engine that is making the connection to the company. What does that mean? It means that the control plane doesn't have access to your infrastructure. If something goes wrong at any time, you can just cut the credential. You can just remove the Qovery engine. It's like you have one push button to say, hey, I want to drop the connections with the control plane. And then from that, you're completely isolated. So it's super, super important. That's how we consider and we work. And we wanted to prevent any like potential leak, any potential breach for our customer. One other aspect, because we're talking about that, is if for some reasons the control plane of Qovery is no longer working, maybe the web interface is biggie, you don't have access to anything, you can't deploy from Qovery, you can still, your infrastructure is still running because it's running on your side. It's running. So your application will not be impacted at all. It's super important. So and you can still continue, you get access to infrastructure. So if you want to get access to your Kubernetes cluster and all those things, it's completely possible. Qovery has been made for that reasons, to make like the 90% of the work, like building a deployment platform like this in just 30 minutes. And then from that, you can build on top of Qovery. Yeah. I'm looking at the other question. Thank you, Pascal. I hope it responds to your question. Raphael, thanks for the talk. Do you support a multi-accounts AWS account organization? Qovery engine can deploy to a different AWS account, and the segregation is done with different AWS account instead of. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Absolutely. It's something that you can do. If you wanted to, for instance, run your production on one cluster and the other environment on other like AWS account and clusters, you can do that. It's absolutely possible. It's absolutely possible. And we have customers that are like, they want to do that this way. They don't want to have like they don't want to have like the staging environment running with the production or the development and feature request with the same cluster. I hope it responds to your question, Rafael. Okay. Thanks to you guys. It's great. Thank you for all your questions. If you have like any other questions in the meantime, or you're too shy to ask them publicly, just feel free to send me an email. I just go back to the, yeah. Thank you, Rafael. Happy to connect on LinkedIn if you want to talk about that. Happy to. Thank you, all of you. So you have my email here. You can connect on Discord, on LinkedIn, on whatever you want, on Twitter. It's no problem. And happy to talk. And I hope you like this presentation. And just let's stay in touch. Thank you.